But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
Mr. Reagan is a misogynist. Hello, Mr. Reagan, otherwise known as Chris Coles. I'm sure you chose Chris Coles as your pseudonym because it sounded cooler than Mr. Reagan. That's a shout out to my good friend Nick Redding, who was accused of choosing the name Nick Redding because it sounded cooler than his pseudonym Eric Duckman. Yeah. There
so
you
people
go.
thought the real name was fake.
Yeah, people thought his real name was fake, and his fake name was real. So, and his fake name is a cartoon character from a 1990s or early 2000s Jason Alexander animation project.
Adult Swim.
Yeah, from Adult Swim. So called Duckman. So I don't know how they. Yeah, what a mistake to make is, as my dad would say. But okay, so
wait a minute.
It's going by Carl Benjamin now. I don't know what that is about.
I thought Duckman was on Comedy Central. I think that's what it was from.
Yeah, I forget what it was. All I know.
Way to be pedantic,
was
Brian.
that in Canada, it was syndicated on Teletoon. I see you're drinking your white supremacy juice there. Mr. Reagan, are you enjoying that and enjoying your ability to digest lactose? Are you lording it over everyone who lacks that ability?
My sister's Katie, her husband is Kevin Kinports, all K's. Would be a funny idea to do KK milk. We don't do chocolate.
I think
fun family joke.
that would be actually pretty funny. But let's just get started here. I've got some questions for you. So Chris, how did you land this juicy role as Mr. Reagan on YouTube? Did you answer a casting call, or did the person who writes your scripts for you just spot you walking down the street one day and just cold approach you?
Yeah, that's a funny assumption that people have. When I did my big AOC video that kind of blew up, a lot of it was talking about the Young Turks. It turns out that they weren't actually the masterminds behind it. It was a guy named Zach Exley, this Justice Democrat stuff. A lot to do with and AOC and all that stuff. This video, they respond search on me, but there's not a lot on me because I just started doing this by myself. Company, there's writers and there were producers involved, and me in my apartment. I just watch YouTube videos, write my own scripts. It's just me. It's just my perspective. Me and Sargon were actually laughing about this the other week because it's just funny how people think that we're connected to some larger network, because they are. They're almost always, like, you talk about Vox, these big companies, YouTubers, they're all connected to these bigger organizations, whereas a lot of us conservatives stuff and saying what we think involved in these bigger groups, they can't our actual reality, that we're just these random guys just talking about
interject for a second, because I think that we're getting a lot of audio chopping.
Yeah, like you're in and out.
Voice activation is too low.
You want me to turn my mic up, do you think?
No, not your mic. It would be your voice activation in your set. Of course, Honey Badger Radio.
There's like a noise. There's a noise gate. There could be a noise gate issue.
There's probably a noise gate issue. If you go to your settings
on Discord.
Yeah, and then go to it's like the little wheel, the little gear, and is your input mode on voice activity?
Hold on.
You go to settings and then voice and video, and then in there you should be able to see it.
Yeah, and you'll have to like reduce or increase the
Activity.
tolerances. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so
Sensitivity is probably too low. Yeah. Let's okay. All right. How's that? Is that better?
That
well, you'll have
actually
to talk
seems
for
better.
a while. So
Yeah, you'll have to.
I will disappear into the mist now.
Okay, and I will
Better.
I will essentially just reiterate what I believe you just said,
More
which
concise.
which is how you find it very interesting that people could see you for what you are, which is a page shill who's given a script, and then has been provided with this what looks like an apartment, but which is probably a set, no different from the Jimmy Kimmel Show or something like that, and you're pretending to be a person with the opinions you hold. So I just wanted to continue with this interview. How does it actually feel to be a mouthpiece for detestable views that you couldn't possibly agree with on what is obviously a Stephen Colbert-esque parody show?
That actually is the saddest comment that I get in my comment section. If a leftist comes onto my channel and they say something like, believe this is obviously like parody or something. If you just watch the show and listen, assume lying. Assumption on the left are always lying. And I think that has to do with that. In my perspective, I think that a lot of leftists are actually racist and sexist. Feminists, like strong feminists, the really crazy radical ones, intrinsic belief that women are inferior, out about raising women up. Some of these leftists have an idea that black people are inferior. Got to lift black people up in society. Right, I can speak for myself. Do not think that black people are inferior. We genuinely do not think that women are inferior. Think, let's treat these people fairly. Think, no, you do not. You do not think that you do think they're inferior. You must think they're inferior, and therefore you're lying and you're just trying to keep them down. I genuinely think that women are capable and black people are capable.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you think blacks and women are inferior. All right, so moving on. Given that the views you
Kathy Newman video.
Given that the views you espouse on the Mr. Reagan show are morally indefensible, does it ever worry you that young or naive viewers might take you seriously and get sucked into these vile beliefs?
I hope so. One thing, when I started doing this, I did a lot of videos about Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson was constantly having white supremacist followers. That they should be thrilled by this. Anybody on the left is that supremacist followers, not himself a white supremacist or doesn't claim to be, actually relatively happy about this. Because if a white supremacist is listening to somebody on supremacy who's against racism and sexism and all these horrible things, maybe they'll start to nudge that ideology. Not listening to anybody like that, then they won't their perspective at all, right? They'll stay in their perspective. So, not define you. You influence your audience, hopefully.
So what you're saying is that Jordan Peterson is completely immune to the entirety of his audience, which we all know are alt-right white supremacists. He's going to like be able to resist them and therefore like God complex much anyway. Now
I love you, Karen. I love you so much.
As my last question, okay, you claim that you have a girlfriend, and apparently the supposed girlfriend has appeared on camera in one of your videos, but your entire online persona is an obvious fiction. And she's super hot, and you don't really appear to be over 6 feet tall. So I'm skeptical. If you contend that she's not merely cast in the role of your girlfriend, as you have been cast in the role of Mr. Reagan, I think we've agreed on that. would you be willing to provide us with some video evidence of the two of you being intimate just to confirm? I mean, like, it's for fact-checking purposes only. Only.
Well, it's, she's Russian, so there's very different customs involved. It's very weird.
Yeah, that's why she's hot. Which is why I was wondering if you could send me some footage.
Check your DMs.
So you're saying there's a chance.
So you're saying there's a chance.
Let's try this, because we're still having audio issues. If you could either you could lower your sensitivity, or and I know it's not going to be pretty, but we could try turning off the camera to see if that sort of fixes it too.
Yeah, that might use up on the bandwidth.
Camera is off.
Infinite regress.
Yeah.
All right.
Don't worry about that.
We've watched you drinking your white supremacy juice long enough, Mr. Reagan.
Long enough. Sorry, I tried to display my beautiful face, but yeah, we can turn that off. Yeah.
Okay, so now you are just a Discord, whatever that is,
emoji, or I could send you some hardcore pornography to.
It's that's fine. We don't have any strikes on this channel yet. I like to call those the Mickey Mouse pants, because that's what they look like, is Mickey Mouse pants. But I think it's supposed to be a controller. But anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, they do look like Mickey Mouse pants. I never thought about that. That's great.
Yeah, they're like Mickey Mouse lederhosen. And how can you tell Walt Disney was like a big fan of the Germans in pre-war Germany? It's because his little mouse wore lederhosen, essentially.
Shame. It's such a shame that they do that. They're just.
Yeah, well, but oh well, whatever. It's just like, honestly, I just, do you remember? I don't know if you've ever seen any of these, Mr. Reagan. Do you remember seeing any of those World War II propaganda videos that all of the movie studios were sort of pressed into making by the American government?
Yeah, well, a lot of them were made by Disney, I think.
Yeah. So he had Donald Duck, and the whole thing was, Donald Duck, he's gotten his paycheck. Now he's going to the speakeasy and he's going to spend it all on hookers and blow, right? And, but what he should be doing is saving a little bit every paycheck so that he can pay his taxes to bury the Axis. Remember that?
I never saw that one, but I love it.
It was. Well, I made up the hookers and blow thing.
I know, yeah. The ending bit, I assume, was the real part, yeah.
But
no, I never saw it. I love it.
Yeah, no, it was. I don't know. Like, I just look at this whole thing. You've been smeared. I found that accusation that you were just playing a role, that you were being paid to play a role, right? Kind of amazing, especially in the context of AOC having answered a casting call and being handpicked out of 10,000 individuals, apparently, to be the one that the Justice Democrats and the brand new Congress were going to back. So and then them saying, well, he said she was an actress and that's not true. And he said it was a casting call and that's not what it was. And all of this. And it's like, these are allegories. They're analogies.
Right.
Yeah. So,
well, the really weird thing about that is that deny this. Like, none of the people, just Democrats or brand new Congress, the Young Turks or anything like that, their defense is that we were transparent. We talked about this on the Young Turks. We told everybody. Yeah, no, you told your financial supporters, right? You told the people who you wanted to get money from that this was, a kind of a, but you told them that this was like that these candidates were actually just going to be shills for your particular. You didn't tell the constituents that were voting for these people.
No,
that's the difference in the transparency, right? You were transparent to the patrons or whatever, the people who are donating money to your cause. You're not transparent to the voter. These are two very different groups. That, I think, is where that was their defense. Their defense is that we were transparent. They never said we didn't do this. But then you have these outside groups, these like third-party groups, figure out, okay, how do we suffocate this narrative? How do we reduce the impact of this? So they tried lots of different things, but it's true. So it's hard for them, whatever they can.
Well, yeah, of course they're going to do whatever they can to try and explain it away or justify it or say it wasn't quite what you say it is, and and it wasn't. We weren't actually trying to get one over on the voters and stuff like that. I think that when you unearthed that footage of Zach Exley saying that he wanted to hack the election, and one of the ways that he wanted to hack it was via choosing districts where people always vote Republican and actually convincing the members of the Democratic Party in those districts to switch allegiance to Republicans so they could vote in the primaries and get one of these candidates in as a Republican. Right?
It was much more damning than the original video. That was in the second video.
Yeah, it was.
It was an audio file. They had done a radio show.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, so he was proposing, right? Regardless of whether they did it or not, but he was proposing as a great idea. Let's run a bunch of socialists as nominal Republicans. Let's convince all the Democrats in that district to switch to the Republican Party so they can vote in the Republican primary, because these yokels don't do anything other than put an X beside the name next to the R, right? And so we're going to
glad you paid attention to that part, because didn't see the second video, and it's so much worse than the first video.
Oh yeah, no, and it's so it's based on a number of assumptions. I mean, this reminds me of this one feminist who shall not be named, because I'm in a flame war with her on. Never mind right now. But she came right out in public and said, based on this one court case in Oklahoma, that it's not a crime to orally rape an unconscious woman in Oklahoma, and she didn't dig any deeper than her source article, which said that this act was not criminalized in Oklahoma, right? She didn't look into the statutes. She didn't look into the court decision before she made that statement, right? Well, it is criminal. It is a criminal act in Oklahoma. It's just not the act that the guy was charged with. He was charged with it. It was the equivalent of somebody committing burglary and then the dumb fuck prosecutor charging him with robbery. And the fact that he committed burglary meant that it didn't fit the elements of the crime of robbery. So the guy was acquitted of robbery, right? That doesn't mean it's not a crime to burgle houses in fucking Oklahoma. Right?
A misapplication of the law. They messed up.
Oh, I don't think he messed up. I think he was actually relying on the emotional intensity of this particular crime, which was very easily provable. I mean, it was one of these cases where I'm just like, oh yeah, that fucking happened, right? They have all kinds of evidence that absolutely happened, right? He wanted to coerce through shame, right, the judges to legislate from the bench and actually write law from the bench, right? Expand the scope of the existing law and call this something that the statutes did not call it, right? So I think he was trying to force the judges' hands, and they just said, no, we're not going to violate the public trust in that way, because that is not our job. Our job is to interpret law through statute and precedent, not to write law. And so because of that,
what happened, right?
Yeah, because of that, you had all of these feminists all up in arms saying it's not a crime to do this in Oklahoma. And I'm like, it's a crime to do this in Oklahoma. It's called sexual battery. Gets you up to 10 years in prison, up to 20 years if you do it to someone under 16. Why aren't you blaming the prosecutor? Don't blame the courts. The courts are being responsible. The courts are actually acting in the public trust.
Those punishments sound pretty good to me. I mean, I think that they should have pretty hardcore punishments for sexual crimes. I think they're particularly heinous, and I like to see pretty hard punishments for that kind of stuff. Right. I think this often happens. Leftists, they love to mischaracterize things. Do you think that they're intentionally mischaracterizing it, or do you think that they genuinely don't care to dig deeper?
Well, I think, honestly, because I've been trying to challenge this Feminist for years over this statement, just asking her, like, are you aware that you misrepresented the facts? Whenever I come across her, I don't come across her very often, right? But she dropped into my mentions a few days ago, and so I asked her again because she's never given me an answer. And she's one of these people, anytime anybody makes a statement that she doesn't like, she's like, citation needed, right? And so I said, have you ever?
She has a PhD, by the way. Do you guys know she has a PhD?
I think she has a PhD.
Most people with PhDs are morons.
Oh my God. But okay, so I say, have you ever corrected your false statement that it's not a crime to, orally rape an unconscious woman in Oklahoma? And she's like, I never said that. And I'm like, here's what I remember you saying, kind of paraphrasing it, right? And then she's like, I never said that. Here's what I said. And she posts a screenshot of the script she used where it says, right, describes what happened, and it says, you've just been the victim of a crime, right? Well, not in Oklahoma. And doesn't go on to qualify that, okay, it is a crime. It's just not the crime that it's not called the thing that I want it to be called. Yeah. She never went on to clarify that. And she thinks that that's proof that she never said it. And I'm like, I never said X because I also said things. Right? Like that's not proof that you never said it, right? How can you even talk to people like that? I think she honestly believes that she never said that, or that if she did say it, she never said it in such a way that would lead people to believe that this was the case, that it's not a crime. And I'm just like, I'm looking at it like, how irresponsible can you be? You're just announcing to every rapist in Oklahoma, here's a perfectly legally,
they do this with a lot of the mainstream
to rape
stuff.
women in your state. Like, why don't you go orally rape unconscious women, all you rapists in Oklahoma? You won't. It's not even against the law, right?
This is a pretty common tactic on like CNN or MSNBC.
Yeah,
because they will say something that isn't maybe technically a lie, but is absolutely going to convince people of something that is deceptive, right? They are actually something so completely effectively that despite the fact that they're not stating the lie, clearly, people are getting the wrong impression about something. And that's the intention. Like, that's their intent. They don't have to apologize. That's what they think. I suspect that that's why they do it this way, is because they don't want to have to apologize, or maybe they don't want to be liable or something.
Well,
deception is deception.
It is. Did you ever see the brouhaha over the MSNBC story? There was like a Tea Party rally in front of the White House protesting Obamacare back when Obama was president.
This would have been like 7 years ago or something.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Anyway, and so there was this big story because there was somebody there open carrying. He had a pistol on his hip, and he had like an assault rifle across his back, strapped across his back. And the commentators on MSNBC said, and this has raised worries about, white racists who might want to harm the president because he's black, right? Okay. Okay. Right. You know what they did? They chopped the guy's head and hands off because you know what? He was black. He was a black man in a pressed white shirt and tie.
I don't remember that, but I love that.
He was a black man in a pressed white shirt and tie. It was all visible on the original footage, and they cropped the original footage.
I've been trying to compile some hoax stuff. Actually, a brilliant addition, because that happened even before Trump.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, and they didn't say he was white. Right? They didn't say he was. So technically, they weren't lying.
But I feel like, I don't know. It's like they know that they're going to lose if they deal in substance. So they've got to do the song and dance. They got to do a show for everybody. Mm-hmm. Like, they're really good at the show. My theory about this is that if you're wrong consistently, mm-hmm. develop a way to win people over. So you become really good at marketing. You become really good at advertising your ideas. I think this is one of the reasons why the right isn't that good at marketing their ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Confident that what you're saying is true, you don't feel like you should have to develop some kind of like marketing campaign. You just tell people the truth and they believe you, hopefully, right? That's the idea. Well,
hopefully
is so consistently wrong about things that they have over the past several decades developed techniques to convince people of things that aren't true, to market their bad ideas. The show than we are. They're great at it. They're great at the emotional pull. Sad story. Sympathize with this group, and that'll get this legislation passed. And it's like, you just maybe like made a million other people suffer. As of this 1,000 people, you deceived people.
Yeah. Oh, I think one of one of the biggest cases that's indicative of this, and even Mother Jones, for crying out loud, came out and said, okay, this may have all been based on a hoax. So ages ago, years and years ago, during one of the Iraq wars, right, there was this woman named Jamie Lee Jones, I want to say. She was a contractor for KBR, right? And she was sent to work in Iraq. And she made this complaint of having been brutally, viciously raped. And some of the injuries that she was describing were just absolutely horrific. She said one of her breast implants ruptured and all of this stuff, right? So we're talking about a brutal, violent offense. And then she further accused KBR of locking her in a shipping container under armed guard, right? And refusing to give her food and water and all of this after she made this complaint. And then Al Franken picked up the whole thing and ran with it and essentially changed federal legislation using this case as the impetus before it had ever been resolved, in order to coerce, essentially to remove binding arbitration as the way that multinational corporations under contract with the government, right, such as KBR, under contract with the U.S. military, blah, 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 that they would not be able to force binding arbitration, that you would be able to have a lawsuit. And then so once that legislation changed and they made it retroactive just for this one woman, this poor woman who suffered all of these horrible things, right? And she goes and sues. And she ended up losing her case and being ordered to pay something like $2.5 million to KBR.
Wow.
Yeah, because the entire thing was
standing legislation now.
Yeah, and the entire thing was just made up. She appears to be someone who has been suffering or had been for 10 years previous from Munchausen syndrome. So faking illnesses and problems in order to get sympathy.
Attention.
Yeah. And so I'm just like, this is the problem. This is like why Paul Bloom wrote the book, what was it called? Against Empathy. The rational.
I always talk about being dispassionate. Politics is about what you call ethical dilemmas, right?
Yeah.
Ethical dilemmas. Do I help this 1,000 people or do I help this 1,000,000 people? It's almost always about that, right?
Yeah.
So when you say, well, there are these special interest groups that say, no, you got to help the 1,000 people because it's my group.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if I help this 1,000 people, they're going to only be helped a little bit. If I help this 1,000,000 people, they're going to be helped a lot, and there's a lot more people.
Yeah. Yeah.
White.
No, I think
those people are white, so we can't help them.
Yeah. Well, the rational argument against compassion, or the argument for reason and against a stirring of passions, I think.
Emotion.
Yeah. So. But
okay, look at the Kavanaugh case.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty clearly silly.
Oh,
he was a teenager. He jumped on a girl on a bed. Maybe if it was even him, which it probably wasn't,
or if it even happened. Yeah.
So we don't know if it happened. We don't know if it was him. Even if it was him, he jumped on a girl on a bed in a party, and he did not attack her in any way sexually, but she thought he might. This was the entire accusation, was that the girl thought he might rape her, but he didn't do anything remotely like that, but she was afraid he would. How did this go to like this big hearing? Like, how did that even go to a hearing? Well, it's because people on the internet were drawing pictures of a woman's hands being held down, her mouth being clasped with his hand. It's like, well, she remembers this in pretty vivid detail for it being, 600 years ago, and them being in high school together, and idea what the heck she's talking about. But, it has to go to court because, believe her, they practically ruined this guy's life. He may not have been confirmed.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
guy.
I look at that and I think, there's also the issue of the Democrats having had her email in their possession explaining all of this and saying she didn't want to come forward, and having that in their possession. They could for 40 days or something like that before they finally disclosed it publicly. And, in order to essentially reopen the confirmation hearings after they had closed. So they were holding it in their pocket. They could have given it to the FBI. It could have all been investigated. Could have all been investigated by the FBI, sort of behind closed doors, respecting her privacy, respecting, sort of the idea that if it couldn't be proven or if it was not a credible accusation, then there's no reason to drag his name through the mud over it. All of that stuff could have happened. But no, they wanted to make a big public circus out of it. And, like a lot of people found her testimony to be genuine and all of that. And I just watched the whole thing going, she's acting like she's on the verge of tears the entire time, but she does not need a single tissue the whole fucking time. Right. Even Kavanaugh needed a fucking tissue. Right?
100 years ago.
Yeah.
I can understand trauma, kind of, lasting that long. But if it's lasted that long, the trauma's lasted that long, there is some sense of distance.
Well, but even if you could argue that the trauma has lasted that long and she was genuinely on the verge of tears, she didn't need a fucking tissue. She was faking being on the verge of tears. Right?
Clearly,
the whole fucking time.
Faking.
Right? I'm looking at it and I'm going like, he's trying not to cry and he's blowing his nose and sniffing through the whole thing. She hasn't given one sniffle, but she's acting through the entire thing like she's on the verge of bursting into tears. Right. And
how about the Democrats that were grilling him, like Kamala Harris? I mean, they were brutal.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, you don't actually know that this guy's guilty.
Yeah.
Some kind of like, he treating him like he was one of Hitler's henchmen.
Mm-hmm.
Madness. It's like you guys like have some sense of propriety and sympathy and humanity.
Have you no decency, sir? General McCarthy, have you no decency?
Yeah.
Sorry. But yeah, no, it's like, well, you can turn that back on them because that's how they're behaving now, right? If you
people are up for election, they're trying to get elected now.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly through that, like Kamala Harris, a few things, but Willie Brown being one of them. But yeah, I think during those hearings, who was that other woman? Angry Klobuchar. I call her Angry Klobuchar.
Oh,
nobody knew who she was until the.
Do you know what bothers me most about those two women? That they both sound like this when they talk.
They do.
I know. I can't. I'm sorry, but I can't imagine either of them as president because they both sound like this when they talk.
What is that? Because that's
I don't even know.
Do you want an explanation?
It's an affectation. It's an affectation. So. Yes, I do want an explanation, Allison.
It's an affectation of weakness. Essentially, they're saying that they are so breathless that they can barely speak. They're just like crawling from their deathbed.
Their corsets are too tight, and they can't take a deep breath. Fainting couch and their heart's torn. Yeah.
It's also I've noticed that these individuals who do this also tie it with body language that suggests their vestibular system hasn't fully developed. That's their ability to have balance and know where their arms are in relation to the rest of them. So they I don't know if you've watched them, they'll sort of look like a toddler who's learning to walk. They'll just sort of fall over and flop.
Well, you know who was also like that was the woman accusing.
Beto's like that. He's constantly flapping his arms like he's on a tightrope trying to maintain his balance. Like he's like Beto Walenda. Sorry.
The woman that accused that too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah,
it's
absolutely.
an affectation of weakness in order to play on our desire to protect the vulnerable. Which
You know, you are so spot on, because that does happen a lot. I mean, it's not just this particular set of attributes, but there are other kinds of things that happen. They develop, like I meet some women who act ditzy women, but they're like models. They grow up very beautiful, act dumb, that people help them and they don't have to do crap in their life.
Yeah.
Paris Hilton fakes being stupid all the time so that people just give her whatever the heck she wants, but she's very smart.
There you go.
It's
well,
a manipulative tactic.
It's a manipulative tactic. Yeah.
One of the things
like
too.
What cats do.
One of the things too that adds to that idea that it's a manipulative tactic is the fact that physical attractiveness and IQ are actually correlated. So if the more physically attractive you are, the higher your IQ is likely to be, right?
That's actually true?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's because the smartest people historically, not for the last 100 years or so, because smart people have fewer kids now.
1,000 years maybe, yeah.
But yeah, over the last like million years, the smartest of us had the most babies and were able to raise them the most successfully, and also were the ones who had the better. They had like sort of the pick of the cream of the crop in terms of physical attractiveness in their mates as well, right?
Sure.
So yeah, it's like physical attractiveness and intellect go hand in hand, and yet you have all of these very, very smart women pretending to be dumb.
That's so true.
In order to get things, and it's just like, oh my god. So
yeah, and in this case, I don't know if I would qualify them necessarily as particularly attractive. I mean, they're not horrible to look upon, but I don't find the women that you guys are talking about doing
symmetrical features. They have clean, clear skin.
Well, they're attractive to men.
They have.
I meant the the politicians you were talking about initially.
No, they don't.
Well, we're talking about a completely other type of affectation, right? As opposed to the affectation of weakness, the affectation of
stupidity.
Okay, but here's
a form of weakness.
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? The very attractive women know they have a lock on male attraction to them, so they can act dumb and get the things they want by doing that. But women who are less attractive they can't leverage being stupid to make men want to do things for them. So they have to act like they're intelligent, right? They can't hide their intelligence.
So even if they're not intelligent, they got to pretend.
Yeah, but at the same time, they leverage this facade of weakness in order to
vulnerability. It's another aspect of I think I would actually qualify it. Another aspect of feminine beauty is to be vulnerable, and feminists definitely have a lock on that particular beauty ideal, for better or for worse.
Do you mean the sort of like delicacy, like being delicate?
No, I mean being
fragile,
affecting vulnerability. So, I mean, if you think about it, I've read a lot of feminist scholarship, there is nothing that feminism could not reduce women down to victims.
I do fall for that a lot. If I feel like a woman needs my help, attracted to her,
well, it's
I will
involve
myself
with it.
It's
sort of like saying I fall for breathing quite a lot. If you're
I don't think that there's anything wrong with, seeing somebody, who happens to be a woman who's in need of assistance and offering some help. I think that that's actually perfectly fine. And I think that
there is an instinct. There is a male instinct, and it is very strong.
Yeah. So, yeah, but, like when you look at somebody like Kamala Harris just like she was being incredibly aggressive toward Joe Biden in the debate over the busing thing and all of that. Just absolutely punishing and aggressive and shaming and all of that. But she managed to make herself look like she was punching up instead of punching down. And it's like, how does that even freaking, or even punching laterally, like being equals and she's punching at him on a level playing field? She managed to make herself turn herself into the victim of his opinion back in the 1970s.
Well, you know what I've heard a lot lately, the new sort of like feminist shouting point, I guess I'd call it, is a lot of women will say like, "What are you afraid of? I'm 5'2" and 110 pounds."
Yeah. No,
Afraid of me.
oh yeah, no, and one of the things too, there was like a hit piece done, a video hit piece done on me and the Honey Badgers. I forget by whom. Maybe it was Vice. I forget though. But where they interviewed a feminist, and she said, "Oh, I wish we were as successful as these people claim we are. I mean, they claim that we've changed all these laws and done all of this stuff, but we're just like little girls twirling our pigtails and not being effectual at all, right?" And I'm like, I wish we had the power that they say we do. And it's like, how is that not so transparent that you're just like, oh, I'm just a girl. Why are you afraid of me?
Yeah, there's all these weird, it goes back to what I was saying before about being really good at advertising bad ideas.
Oh yeah.
They're just so good at figuring out how to act weak when they need sympathy and how to act tough when they want to seem, like they're a strong, independent woman.
I don't even think they act tough, really. All they do is assert it.
Exactly right.
Well,
exactly right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like
they think, oh, you guys are amazingly strong women, and they support them.
Well, I'm willing.
It's all open, like it's just basically fatuous praise. There's no actual substance to it at all because they don't actually oppose. Nothing opposes that.
Stylistic. So many people love style over substance.
Yeah, they do, and in this case, it does. Like you were talking about, you have a response to women in need. Like most men do. That's an instinct that men have. It's an instinct that really every male member of a social mammalian species has. Like stallions will insert themselves between their social group, the mares and the foals, and whatever's attacking them. And male wolves will do the similar thing to protect their packs. And male humans are exactly the same. They're there's some sort of danger. I have to go save my social group. I have to go save the vulnerable. That's just part of being a man. And the where I, for example, critique this is, I mean, you look at feminist theory. Essentially, what they're doing is they're creating the perfect way of exploiting men for that very instinct while denying it exists.
Yeah.
And that just really angers me. The hypocrisy of that.
Yeah.
That's so true. That is so. You're really smart, Allison.
Yeah, she is.
Karen, why didn't you tell me? She's like a genius.
I know. That's why I hang out with her so much.
Allergies and.
Oh yeah, no, and it's just that she has a very succinct way of putting things, and
Exactly.
she has a very succinct way of arguing a point as well. Like there was, when you have a feminist who says, women are the vast majority of the victims of X, and then she says, well, have you measured Y? Right? Have you measured men?
Yeah, how many men are victims of it?
How many men are victims of it? And they're like, well, I've measured women. And they're like, okay, but have you measured men? And they're like, well, I don't need to because I know this many women are victims. She's like, except you said that women are overwhelmingly the victims of X. How do you know that if you've never measured Y or if you've never measured for men, right? And then they just kind of wander off or they block her or something.
That's the Socratic method, right? You just keep asking questions until people end up, it's bizarre how they'll do it.
Yeah.
They'll contradict themselves.
Yeah, no, and it's like it's so amazing. Like when you look at the style of argumentation, right? It's they'll say that you don't have any right to speak because you haven't done the research. And then when you say, well, okay, but do you disagree with what I said? Right? Is what I said wrong? They won't say that it's wrong.
Right.
because they know it's wrong or it's right, right? But they'll just continue to attack you for being like
Found this
uneducated.
I found a perfect example of this the other day when I was
Hmm.
looking into the tweets that Trump did and the squad's reaction.
Oh God, yeah.
In the squad. So they went on Gayle King's show on CBS, and Gayle
Hmm.
King was asking them what to Trump's accusation. React to Trump's accusation that you hate America. React to Trump's accusation that you hate Jewish people. React to Trump's accusation that you love Al Qaeda, right? Because
Yeah.
I think Ilhan Omar said something about people
Oh,
are like get
she
weird
was
about Al
asked.
Qaeda, but they don't get weird about America.
She was asked. She was asked to disagree to disavow Al Qaeda, and she just kind of made a no comment, kind of non-response. I think is what
Exactly
happened.
what happened throughout this Gayle King interview. None of them. I think this is in my last video that I produced. Responded to the accusations of Trump. Well, it's not worthy of responding. Well, why are you doing this interview? You're doing this predicated on you responding to Trump. But the entire interview was basically just them attacking Trump and saying he's a racist. But like, the reason you're not responding to these accusations is because you know they're true.
Yeah.
Because you're above it. It'd be so simple to say, no, I love America. I love Jewish people are great. And Al Qaeda is horrible. I disavow Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda is awful. Is terrible. 9/11 was terrible. So easy to say that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Instead, they sidestep and then they just say, "Well, but Trump's racist." It's like their only response. It's bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A lot of the stuff that we talk about with the left is accurate, and it's very, very hard for them to respond. Sleight of hand, essentially.
Yeah.
They basically, if you look at all of, and it's particularly the left, I often say, because I'm actually sort of an old liberal myself. I used to march in the marches against like the G6 and the G12 or whatever.
Look at Karen's haircut. She was clearly a liberal at some point.
No, I was never liberal.
No, but I
just have difficult hair.
Race.
Okay, my mistake.
But even when I was a liberal, I used to say, I'd rather hang out with conservatives because they're decent people rather than other liberals. But
weird, because I'm kind of the same. I was always a conservative, but I always had mostly liberal friends, which is weird.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just being open-minded to having people having different opinions. But what I've noticed about liberals, or at least the left, and I say that it's what the left is becoming. The cancer started in the left lung, but the cancer isn't the left lung. The cancer, the way that they argue is always on the attack. So they never actually answer a substantive point. They always just turn it around in an attack.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And it's always trying to it's usually a moral attack. You're a racist, you're a misogynist, you're a sexist. I mean, I would pose this to feminists. I would describe how I think feminism harms women by reducing women down to victims, which has significant psychological effects, including, in my opinion, from my research, increasing the rate at which women kill themselves. So this is costing women's lives to present them as victims in the way that feminists do. And I would describe all of that. And then they would accuse me of having internalized misogyny. I'd be like,
I'm trying to help women here, you guys. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm so what you're saying is being right as a feminist is more important than helping women, even though you think your moral legitimacy as a feminist supposedly comes from the fact that you help women more than anyone else. And it's really that. They have co-opted that narrative. I apologize. It's really, they have co-opted that narrative and that instinct that we have, that men have to protect and provide for women, and society in general has to protect and provide for women.
It doesn't matter if you have a good idea. They're the feminists, and therefore their word is, gospel.
Their word is law, and their word is law because they occupy the space of being the ideology that benefits women most, except that it doesn't. But that doesn't matter. What's important is
they don't want to hear any outside. Right, exactly, because they're trying to brand themselves.
Well,
yeah,
and
themselves.
I mean, you sort of look at feminism the way you can look at Christianity, right? Okay, so there's like the fundamental unifying belief of feminists, and as far as I can tell, after 10 years of looking into everything, it is the belief in patriarchy, that society is or has historically been a patriarchy, the patriarchy, and that the key characteristics of the patriarchy are female oppression and subordination and male dominance and privilege. Okay. And
Yep.
these are the grand unifying beliefs of the entire church of feminism. Doesn't matter whether you're a TERF or a trans inclusionary feminist, or you're a radical, or you're like sort of a more moderate or liberal feminist. You believe that even if society isn't that way now, it has been that way for, for most of the last 10,000 years until feminists came along, right? So even someone like Christina Hoff Sommers or maybe Camille Paglia would agree with this as the central tenets of feminist belief, right? And
Paglia might not actually believe with that exactly, but I'm sure that Christina would agree with it.
Yeah, I have my doubts about Polly. I'd have to read more of her stuff, but when push comes to shove, when you try and get them to admit to that, they'll say, well, not all feminists, right? Not all feminists actually believe that. And it's like, okay, so what you're saying is not all Christians believe that Christ was the Son of God and died for our sins, right? So, and you're going to ask me, okay, but what do Mormons believe, and what do Jehovah's Witnesses believe, and what do Baptists believe, and what do Presbyterians believe, and what do Lutherans believe, and what do Catholics believe? And I'm like, I'm not talking about the nuances of whether transubstantiation is real. I'm not talking about whether just because Christ was poor, the church should be poor, or these like minor points of doctrine. Right? I'm talking about the basic unifying belief of feminists. You can't even pin them down on that. They refuse to be pinned down on it.
Look at look at the feminists. This is what I say to them. I'm not going to look at who you say or what you say your church believes. I'm going to look at who feminists excommunicate from feminism for their beliefs.
Such a good point.
Oh my gosh, that indicates what they actually believe is who they kick out. And you definitely kick out any feminist who says, you know what, historical patriarchy, a little shaky on that one. Not sure I believe it. I mean, you kick her out so fast. She gets like gravity sickness, like just from the G force.
Yeah, she's got road rash on her ass. Yeah.
Exactly.
It is weird because feminists seem to think that women need some kind of sympathy in society, right? They're oppressed or whatever. But if you bring up the fact that historically they did actually have it a lot harder than men in many ways, because you had monthly issues that couldn't be taken care of in the same ways they can today.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of things that women couldn't do. You couldn't leave the house at that time, as easily as you can today. The hygiene, just simply like hygienic stuff that women can do today is so much different than 100, 200 years ago. That it's that's why feminism is even possible today. But they don't look back and say, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Of course there was a division of labor. Of course there was a division of gender roles historically. It wasn't maybe the patriarchy. It was just practical. They don't even think about that because they don't want to. But it's like, to me, that's just like a sympathetic way of looking at women historically.
Yeah. Yeah, no, my grandmother, right? She was born in 1909. And into rural poverty. And she was actually a career woman. She made it sort of to grade 8. She only attended school sporadically between grade 3 and grade 8 because she was needed on the farm and to help look after her younger siblings. But she left home quite young, got a job, climbed the ranks, ended up managing an entire floor of a major department store. Married a man younger than her enough that it raised eyebrows, right? Settled down in a small town, took over the general store and the post office, right? And she ran that. And he did manual labor while she did that. And she raised a family. They lived in an apartment attached to that store. And so here's how she did laundry. Okay, she would draw water from the pump in the kitchen, which was a luxury
Yeah.
at that time. That they actually had a pump in the kitchen, a manual, a lever pump in the kitchen, and she would boil water on the stove, and then she would put the clothes into the boiling water on the stove, and then she would stir it around and kind of let it soak, and then she would take it out and she would put it in a wash tub, and then she would kind of scrub it with some, I don't know, rocks or brushes or whatever, and then she would have to rinse it, fill it more with water, right, and rinse all the soap out, and then she would have to run it through a laundry angle, and then she would have to take it out. And this is in Alberta, where it's like,
Freezing.
below zero half the year, at least. Take it out and hang it, and then once it froze on the line, she would take it in and let it sit for a while. And then she would take it back out and hang it again until it froze, and then she'd take it back in, right? And so, I mean, like, this was how she did laundry.
No, yeah, I watched some show called, I forget what it's called. It's on YouTube. It's this guy. He's mainly a chef, and he
Uh-huh.
cooks food from like the 17th, 18th century America and stuff. Really awesome guy. Something and Sons. I can't remember what the show's called, but he talks about stuff like that sometimes on the show.
Mhm.
And it's amazing to me how many household chores were like literally all day things to do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Possibly partly why the feminist movement tends to look down on being a housewife so much today, and they like kind of deride it, which I think is awful.
hmm
I do think that today there is a sense that if a woman is left home alone all day, there is a sense that maybe she could get a bit bored.
Yeah, no,
Kids.
I think that's Betty Friedan's problem with No Name right there. The problem that has no name that she wrote about in the Feminine Mystique was essentially women who were housewives had enough time on their hands during the day after all of these modern conveniences came in, that they were able to think about, to step off of that second tier of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or to look up to the next tier up towards fulfillment and self-actualization. And they were like, I don't feel fulfilled and self-actualized here, right?
Yeah.
Because they just didn't have enough work to do. And it's like my grandmother, being working full time and also, looking after a house and 3 kids and all of that. She had plenty to do all the time, right? And so she never had this sense that I'm not fulfilled. I just don't feel happy. I don't feel fulfilled. She and her husband were working together to provide a decent life for their 3 children and themselves, and sort of working up from having both been born. Actually, my grandfather wasn't born into poverty, but my grandmother was. But my grandfather was born into like sort of a lower middle class kind of family. But having both been born of modest beginnings, and building up something that they could retire on, that they could educate their kids with, that they could
They had a purpose.
yeah. And so I'm just thinking, like, okay, where has that gone? Where has that idea that as a man and a woman together in a partnership, right, regardless of whatever roles you choose for yourselves and each other, right, that you're working together towards a common goal, right, towards making a better life for children, or a better life for yourselves, or all of those things, that you're building towards something, that you're actually constructing something together.
Well, I
right?
talk about this quite a bit when I talk to feminists, and it's a tricky it's a tricky subject to broach, because to some extent you and I are actually agreeing with feminists here. We're saying that if work of a housewife is no longer as fulfilling as it once was, and therefore women must be permitted to work any job they want, or we should open up opportunities for them. And I don't think anybody on the right, really, but I mean the leftists think that we do. We're all fine with that, but there is a loss of the dynamic that used to exist, which was that wife tended to support the husband in his career. And now if you have a woman having her career and you have a man having his career, there is a divergence of,
They're in competition with each other
to some extent, yeah, or they at least have distinct goals.
Yeah.
physical are not necessarily unified. And that's not necessarily a problem. I mean, my mother was a dental hygienist, my father owned a business, and my mother would actually, with some of the money my mother made, my father would invest in the business. I mean, so there was a sort of shared goal there to build the business. But I think that sometimes can cause a problem. And there's just some sense of everybody is supporting one goal, everybody's sort of doing their own thing. I don't know if that's really causing problems in today's society or not, but it seems like it might in some instances. Right?
Well, I
And
think
obviously increase in divorce and all this kind of stuff. So
yeah, I think it definitely it leads to a situation where people end up realizing 10 years after they got married that they just no longer have the same goals,
right.
that, or don't share the same goals rather. So like I think it is part of the problem, and I don't necessarily think that's I don't think we can lay that at the feet of feminism, in
It's just
terms
It's
of,
the Industrial Revolution.
technological
yeah,
advancement.
it's just like
Yeah,
sort of an
exactly right.
emergent property of where we're at
The
now in
Industrial
terms of our,
Revolution took away
yeah.
women's jobs, and then they just sort of floated around like you were talking about Brady Friedan. It's called it the problem with no name. Well, it's the
Yeah.
problem that you don't feel like you're useful to anything, and
Yeah.
that's what the Industrial Revolution, by creating um, washing machines and canned food and all of these other modern conveniences that women used to provide their families. And in the process, women were responsible for the survival of their families and their communities, and they knew, and everybody knew it. It was called the power of necessity. That's what women of the day used to call it. It was the power of being necessary for the survival of your family. And that was taken away from women by the Industrial Revolution. And Betty Friedan identified it. Women were floating around not knowing who or what they were or what their purpose was. And then they latched on to feminism,
You
as
see
if
that?
men had
Yeah. Oh,
stolen
yeah.
their
That's a good
purpose.
point. Actually, they talk about this in old TV shows and old movies sometimes. I was watching the Andy Griffith show the other day, about how it was like the very first episode of the show,
Uh-huh.
moving in, and she was so grateful to them because she said, after the last of my kids left the house for a while now, I didn't know what to do with myself.
Yeah.
Living with
Yeah.
you and your
Exactly.
son, and I have a purpose again. And it was like a touching thing to hear her say. Like it's like this vulnerable thing, such a beautiful statement. Something that you wouldn't really see today because you just don't have that kind of dynamic where you have a woman that sort of wants to kind of take care of. You don't have that, at least not in Hollywood fiction.
Well, you
Yeah.
don't really have this idea that women are of use to anything, really. I mean, if you deconstruct the feminist rhetoric, it basically means that women are perpetual victims of society, of families, of men, which makes them useless. It means that they're not helping to build a society, they're not helping to build a family, they're not helping to build the success of men or have male partners who help build their success. They're just sort of victims of everything and incapable of really rising above that
Or
without
doing anything
identifying.
other than change society so that I feel useful.
Yeah, and
Yeah, you guys over there change society so that I feel
Right.
useful. Right?
that
So
doesn't
it's
work. I mean, you can't
no.
command other people to make you feel useful. You have to pick up a shovel and stop being, stop. It's so ironic. They're sitting there and men are digging a hole and they're saying, "I don't feel useful. Make me feel useful by
Here,
digging
have a
a
shovel,
hole."
bitch.
It's like, pick up the shovel.
I have talked about this quite a bit about who are the real feminists? Like who is it that's actually historically has driven this idea of women need to go to work and stop taking care of the family? Because taking care of the family is such a beautiful thing, right? A very purposeful thing that everybody respects and loves. Yeah, digging a hole, digging a ditch, or being a cog in the machine. That's not really loving work. That's just sort of work. That's just the cog in the
You
I
machine
do
would
type thing.
say
you
it's
do it
loving work
you
if
do
a
it
man is
because
sacrificing
you
for his
do it
family to do it.
because you do it because you love your family. You don't do it because you love
Exactly
the
right.
work. Yeah.
Exactly right. It's a sort of sacrifice that you make for the family, but it's not. Yeah, and so we're talking about like who would want to do that? Like, why would women want to leave dynamic and do this. And we realized it was the women who were the least desirable in society. Have a dynamic where the desirable women, whether they be beautiful or charming or smart or funny or whatever it is, that could to some extent take care of them and the kids, and then she would do whatever was needed to contribute to the family and whatnot. And so the more sort of charming or beautiful or whatever it was that you had, and the vast majority of women had something that men found desirable and could find a husband and all that stuff. But there were women who genuinely lived fairly tragic lives and couldn't marry. They were like old maids, right? They never had kids, and they would have to be like a scullery maid or something like this. Would just live like, die alone and live a pretty. And so I think the idea was, well, we've got to get women into positions or respected, right? Because a woman can't traditional role of a woman to have access to the stuff that men do. And I kind of agree with that. But then the message got perverted, and it got to be, well, if you are a beautiful woman or a charming woman or a desirable woman in any way, and you're still living the traditional female lifestyle, you're actually a disgrace to all women. You should be doing the same thing we are and fighting for our rights to be, important and successful. Should necessarily care about that. They can care about it, but I don't think they should have to.
Yeah, well, I mean, like it's like that comedian said, right? An unattractive woman is just like a man. She's gonna have to work.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so you have that, and then you also have, sort of the Rush Limbaugh putting it a different way, which is, feminism as a vehicle for unattractive women to gain access to the mainstream. That it really is, and I do think that, like, I worked most of my life. I contributed to my family finances most of my life. I've been self-supporting almost my entire
most
adult
women
life.
Since the 80s are like that, though. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not uncommon now. Yeah.
Yeah, not uncommon at all. But I have feminists coming at me and saying, you earn your cushy lifestyle, because apparently I have a cushy lifestyle. You earn your cushy lifestyle, based on bilking vulnerable men out of their money and not providing them anything of value, right? And I'm like, go look at my fucking Subscribe Star, right? In before, oh my God, she's making less than $400. What a loser, right? Right. And then they come back and they say, so how do you make your living? And I say, well, when I first got with my man that I've been with for 9 years, for about 3 years, I supported him and my 3 kids all by myself, right? While he finished school and before he was able to actually get a job in his field and all of that. And right. And then we both worked for a while. And now, because he supports what I do this. And he's making good money. So he supports me. So you're living off a man. Right. And I'm like, I don't ever recall saying that was a bad thing. And I'm sorry, but aren't feminists the ones who are like, women engage in so much unpaid labor that they should be remunerated for, right? Like, and for me, it's even more than for your typical woman, because I got a guy with autoimmune issues, and his freaking diet is just so unbelievable that unbelievably restricted that I have to cook all of his food. I cook all of his meals. I pack his lunches. He can't even remember the shit that he's not supposed to eat. I've proofread papers that he had published. I've done all kinds of stuff to support his career.
No, you guys are doing it right. You guys are a team.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And he doesn't lift a finger around the house, not even around the yard. He doesn't do any yard work, right?
And,
I mean, it's just not his thing, right? And I don't mind doing.
You have to do it. That's how you have to do it. I always used to tell this to my mom, because my mom would always make me take out the garbage as a kid, and I would have done literally any other chore. But she felt like she needed to be dominant or whatever, because she was the mother. She had this, she had this power thing. Figured out that, oh my God, my life would be so much easier if I just made and I had Chris mow the lawn or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It never occurred to her that it would be easier for her. She had to win the battle. So it was never like it was never like a very easy relationship that I had with mom, because it was always like a fight for dominance.
Yeah.
She never had the ability to sort of step away from that and think, okay, what's the smarter move here?
Yeah. No, especially since cutting the grass is way more of a pain in the ass than hauling some garbage to the curb.
Well,
Right.
the reason I hated the garbage is because when I was really little, 5 maybe, she started making me take the trash out, but my mother was so cheap. So
Oh
cheap. I mean,
no. Oh,
it would always be paper bags from the grocery store.
oh
It was
no.
never actually a plastic liner. So maybe, I don't know, a good percent of the time I would be taking the trash out and it would all come out the bottom, right? Because somebody
Yeah.
put something wet in there.
Yeah.
My mom would be like, okay, you have to pick it up. That's your fault. I'm like, I'm 5 years old. I can barely lift the dang thing.
Oh
My
my
goodness.
God. What kind of freaking horrible mommy dearest did you
I know.
have? No
Well,
wire hangers.
Oh my, okay, it wasn't that crazy. But no, there was this idea in my family that you had to work hard.
Yeah.
There was this like sort of pragmatism. Canadians and Oregonians and Australians all tend to be the same in my experience. Far leftists, you got a lot of athletes, you got a lot of very pragmatic people. That tends to be the line that crosses all the different types, is everybody's pragmatic in these places.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always just looked at my parents, right? Like, so my dad refinished our entire basement. He did everything except laying the carpet, including all of the plumbing and the, wiring and all of that, installing the drop ceiling, the whole bit, right?
Yeah, it's my dad, kind of the same, yeah.
Yeah, and I helped him with that. And my mom, she, replastered the cracks. She patched the cracks in my walls.
Jared, I think we're brother and sister.
Yeah, no, and she
we have
went
the
up
same
on the roof after the hailstorm to like look at the shingles and make sure that it wasn't going to leak. And I mean, I remember she was telling me, because I was 2 at the time. I remember I was 2 because I had my footprint in the concrete and it said Karen 2 with my sisters. But when they poured the driveway, right? And they ordered a big truck full of cement, and it was a big driveway. It was like, it had a 2-car parking pad, and then it was about another 2.5 times as big to get from the front of the house, past the house, to the parking pad. So it was like a big driveway. So they ordered this truck of cement, and the guy arrives. She says the guy arrives and he looks at it. It's like my dad, who forgot his rubber boots at work. Okay, so he's standing there in his shoes. And my mom is in her rubber boots and a bikini, and they're standing there with shovels. Okay, and
She gets a little bit of splash up on her. She's good.
yeah. And then so the concrete, the cement truck driver looks and he says to my dad, "Where's your crew?" And my dad points to my mom and says, "She's it." And he's like, "Okay, good luck," and dumps the concrete and said, right, and they managed, right?
I think there's something good about having a tough mom.
Yeah. There really is, because she really showed me she really showed me what women are capable of. So like now, if I need to replace my car battery, I don't need to take it to and pay somebody to do it. I just go buy a battery and put it, put the new one in myself. I can do all of those things. So it's like, it helped me save a lot of money over the years.
And not just that, but you have confidence.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If you're driving your car down the street and you don't know how to fix it and something goes wrong, you'll panic. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman.
Yeah.
And
No,
so
there you go.
Deal with it. That's so important.
Yeah. No, it was like when I figured out what was wrong with the distributor, and so every time my car wouldn't start, I would just pop the hood and take the distributor cap off and pull the little tab down a little bit and then stick it back on, because it wasn't contacting.
Well, that's more advanced than me. I don't know about the distributor cap. Yeah, no, that's pretty good.
Man, I had a car that the exhaust pipe rusted out. So it's like, that's the pipe, not the tailpipe, but the pipe that goes into the muffler, not the pipe that goes out, right? And so my muffler was hanging down, and of course my car was really noisy. So I just got like a tomato juice can and some hose clamps.
You're the female MacGyver.
Yeah, and I got under the car and I popped the tomato juice can because it was the right thickness,
I've
and the
actually
hose
seen that
clamps.
before
Yeah,
because it's the right thickness. Yeah, it's like a makeshift
yeah.
that
So
you
it's
did that.
you just take the top and the bottom off, and you do that, and then when that rusts off, you just replace it.
Funny, man. That's pretty dang. That's pretty good. I mean, I like replace brakes. I'll fix a flat tire. I'll do that kind of stuff. But that's impressive. You're a little bit more advanced than I am. I'm not MacGyvering my car back together.
Yeah, well, when you're poor, you learn all the uses for duct tape, and
So,
tomato juice cans. But yeah, so I mean, like it really was a matter of necessity for me to figure
yeah.
out all those things, right? So I suppose if I had the kind of money that my family has now, back then I wouldn't have necessarily bothered to learn all of
Or
those
just
things.
a
But
weak mother, or just like weak parents.
oh
A lot of
God,
times
yeah.
other people, and you just go, I don't know. This girl needed a jump once. I didn't have a car.
Hmm.
So I said, and there next door, there like next to us, there was like a big project going on. It was like apartment buildings. I go, I'm gonna go back to the house because I can't be around for this. But
Hmm.
you need to just start yelling at these construction guys and go, I need a jump. Somebody's gonna come down here. And I told her, black to black, red to red. I told her, they'll know how to do it, but just somebody will
Yeah.
have a truck. He'll come down, I think I may have had a car, but it was like the battery was too weak because she had this big like camper that she was trying to.
Hmm.
So I left, and she goes and she turns the thing, and immediately, like, all the guys come down, they all give her a jump. It was perfect. It was exactly. So women have their different techniques. They don't necessarily need to learn the stuff that you did, but you went, like, that's crazy. You went the extra mile there.
Yeah,
That's
well,
pretty.
I don't know. And every time I end up, with my hood popped and I'm like poking around under there, and I don't have any men approaching me saying, "Do you need a hand with anything?" Because I actually look like I know what I'm doing.
Look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't. I'm
It's a
not looking
double-edged
around.
sword, really. It's a double-edged sword. You got the
Yeah.
confidence to know, if I get in trouble, I can take care of myself. You and go, she's good.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You don't get those little sort of moments of spontaneous acts of kindness from people as much, but
Unless
at
they
this.
recognize you, because you may be a little bit famous. By the way, speaking of famous,
Mm?
like, the number one job that, like, young people want now, like
Uh-huh.
high school age students, are
Sorry, what?
YouTube star. That's like their
Oh
number
my.
one dream
Oh my
job in America
God.
now. Isn't that funny?
It's disturbing.
Yeah, well, I can see that because like if you really hit it big, like Logan Paul or Belle Delphine or whoever,
No,
some
Delphi,
kind of.
I've just found out about her. She is weird.
Oh yeah, no, she sells her bath water. It's like $30 for
Really?
a little container, yeah. And it sells out. It's just like, yeah, there are people who are willing to pay $30 for, like, I don't know, 3 ounces of Belle Delphine's bath
Oh,
water.
that's so bizarre. Well, I saw somebody do a video on her, and it's bizarre because she's a pretty cute girl, right? And then she
Mhm.
does these kind of like sexy looking videos, and you're like, okay, well, I can see how that's popular. And then she'll just like dump eggs on herself or something.
Yeah, she's a little odd.
Like something that is like initially looks like it's going to be something sexy, and then it's like, why is this? Why is she doing this?
She's a troll. She actually took that routine from an Asian woman named Shaori, who was also this really attractive young Asian lady that would do. She would start off like normal and dance around a little bit. Then she'd just do something crazy, usually involving herself getting dunked in food.
Oh, was she the one who like filmed herself like covering her arms with ketchup and licking it
yeah,
off or some
yes,
weird shit?
yes, yeah. Her name is
Well, the
Shaori. That's the
Japanese
one.
are bizarre. Have you
This
seen their
Yeah.
game
sounds like.
shows?
Yeah.
Who poop rust? Who
Hey
poop
Brian,
rust?
you'll sympathize with this. Art school. Well, maybe your art school was different, but when I graduated art school, I graduated with a girl who used to rub ketchup all over her body, as I think her master's thesis was, or not master's, but her graduation presentation was her lying down on a table and inviting people to push pins into her, and
Whoa.
yeah, she billed herself as like the female jackass. And so she did all this kind of stuff. So it's been done before. This is not new.
There was
You
this.
ever
There was
you
this.
ever you ever you ever see that any of you ever see that video of this woman, right? She's performing in front of an audience and they're all clicking and shit, right? And she does this kind of weird, she puts like a pot and a can of alphagetti on the floor in front of her, and she stands up and she does this kind of weird social justice version of Vincent D'Onofrio's freaking Full Metal Jacket latrine speech, right? And then she opens the can of alphagetti and dumps it in the pot, and then she takes some scissors and like cuts the crotch out of her pants, and then she masturbates in front of everybody, and then she shoves a bunch of the alphagetti and inside her
Yeah.
you know what? And
I was just gonna mention that, Karen. That
yeah,
that
and then they're all like, yeah, that's
no,
awesome.
they're all just like entranced, like they're trying to figure out what is she trying to say. This is so deep.
What
and
is she trying to say? That's always the weird thing with this modern art. It's like
Mm-hmm.
pretty provocative. They're not trying to say anything. And to me, good art says something.
The best part about that viral video about that girl who's doing that bit of performance art with the SpaghettiOs, that took place at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. That was actually the college here in Chicago where that took place. Yeah.
Do you remember what it was called? What the video was called?
I don't remember what it was called. I can look it up though. But if you guys, she was like howling and stuff towards the end or making these weird noises. But yeah, it was just, well, I don't want to make this overly long, but this is this stuff with modern art. This is sort of like a thing that's been growing within that community for some time. I mean, like decades. And it's getting to the point now where when a kid pays, like they put themselves in like 80 grand in debt to go to art school because they want to become better artists of some variety, like they have an interest in the craft. They come out like most of the time they just come out as activists who's actually haven't improved as artists at all, and they're just in debt, and that is a very common thing that happens.
Yeah, or they do their thesis, their art thesis is like carrying a mattress around campus.
Can I make that? Can I offer an observation about that?
Please.
Okay, so I think art generally it celebrates what a society values. So, for example, in like in times of a less material abundance of today, they would paint luxurious grapes and foodstuffs and like flowers and like these beautiful still lifes to represent prosperity. And I think that what this particular art represents is there's, I think, a real lack of any kind of moral core to our society now. I'm not personally a religious individual, but I think we really lost something when the Industrial Revolution sort of took away a lay belief in a central spiritual deity, as it were. So there's this desire, I think, for something to move us morally. And what's sort of filled that void is all of this affectation of vulnerability. And
is SpaghettiOs up the hoo-ha?
Yeah, SpaghettiOs up the hoo-ha, because she's basically saying, I am this vulnerable entity, protect me, revolve around me, let me be your moral center. And I think there's a hunger for that. And I don't know if this is just too high concept for it to make sense, or if it even is high concept. Yeah, you get it?
I get it.
Not only
Go ahead.
Not only do I get it, I actually have had a very similar thought about Hollywood recently. Because if you so Hollywood's doing a bunch of films about the 80s, or that sort of set in the 80s, a bunch of TV shows set in the 80s, right? Have you guys noticed that trend?
Stranger Things and all that, yeah.
Stranger Things is the best example. I mean, it's perfect. I mean, it's beautifully set in the 80s.
Yeah.
If you watch stuff that is actually filmed in the 80s, right? If you watch a lot of TV shows in the 80s, like Quantum Leap or The Wonder Years, stuff like that, looking back to the 60s, the early 60s and the 50s, right? Field of Dreams, stuff like that, right? these or older times that were maybe more moral, or that they thought were more moral, or had like a stronger moral compass in society, or more ethical or wholesome era. So we're doing that now with the 80s. The 80s did that with like the 50s and 60s. Why are we doing all these shows about the 80s? I think that Hollywood recognizes that people want, for some reason, they want to see the 80s. They want to live in that era a little bit to some extent, but they don't really know why. So they're doing all of this sort of stylistic stuff, right? They're setting their television shows in the 80s, but they're using the morality of today, right? The sort of disposable of today, like nothing's ethical, nothing's moral. I think that's the reason that society likes 80s stuff, them of an era where things had more purpose. Things weren't as disposable. Things were a little bit more ethical. And you know, you did have the sort of Madonna side of the 80s that was a little bit more sort of sexually provocative, but then you also had like the religious right, and you had a lot of, you know, your Reagan. You had a lot more wholesome stuff in the 80s as well. Whereas I think people are looking for that. They just don't know exactly what they want or what they're looking for. They're a little bit lost, but you're exactly right. They're looking for some purpose. They're looking for some ethics or some morality. And I think that's why Hollywood's doing a lot of 80s stuff. That's my new epiphany recently.
Or some boundaries. Or some boundaries, right? Like, because I mean, there's nothing that tells a kid that you don't love him, right? Better than giving him no boundaries whatsoever, right? So if like I had a friend growing up, you know, he used to always bug me because my parents insisted that I be home at a certain time, particularly if I was out with the car. And he'd be like, I would just tell your parents to go fuck themselves, you know, if I were you.
Right.
But you know, he was free to come and go as he pleased, and sometimes he'd be gone for like 2 days and his parents wouldn't even notice, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he never thought that they loved him.
Those people
Right.
all turned out a little bit messed up. Yeah, I knew people like
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah. And it's just like, you know, I was just like, you know, I had other friends as well, right, who were like, just tell your parents to go fuck themselves. And I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna tell the people that like feed me and shelter me and clothe me and drive me everywhere I want to go, right? Like to go fuck themselves. I don't fucking think so. Like I got a good gig here, right? They don't beat me, right? You know, they don't feed me hamburger helper, like we eat good. It's like, and what, like, and they treat me nice, right?
When I was
Why?
growing up in the 80s, I think there was a push for parents to try to be friends with their kids.
Yeah, oh yeah, and to be permissive. My mom read Dr. Spock.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
Yeah,
My mom did not read Dr. Spock. My
my
mom was
mom
not a devotee of Dr. Spock.
my mom read Dr. Spock, and she was just like, this sounds like garbage. And
Okay,
and
so she
she
rejected it.
oh yeah, no, she was just like, yeah, no, like I don't think I want to teach my child that she's the center of the universe. I think that might actually cause problems further down the
Oh,
road, right?
wow.
Yeah.
That's so good that she thought that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was like, I mean, she had an intuitive understanding of and this is one of the things too. This is one of there are two primary factors that are correlated with the healthy development of empathy in children. And I'm talking about healthy empathy, not the kind of pseudo empathy or pathologized empathy that you see among a lot of, you know, university students these days, but just generally healthy empathy. And one of them is father involvement, and the other one is free play among same age peers without adult supervision, right? And this is because you actually, when fathers have fathers tend to have a slightly different style of parenting than mothers in terms of the distance that they put between themselves and the child emotionally, and the women set more boundaries but enforce them very sporadically. Men set fewer boundaries but enforce them more rigorously. Men are more likely to essentially say, you're not the center of the universe. Yeah, the adults are talking here. Don't go away, mad. Just go away. All of those things. Men are much more likely to put their foot down in those ways with kids. And then also when it comes to free play in nature, with other kids of not same age, but relatively close age. So, a group of 8 to 10 or 11-year-olds, without adult supervision, without adults there to mediate every conflict, kids need to learn how to get along. They need to learn how to negotiate their own relationships and their own conflicts. And they need to learn that if they act like a diva, they're not going to be welcome to join in the game, right?
That's so spot on. I mean, there's two parallel lessons, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's can both give love and they can both give discipline. But you're right. Like the mom tends to be more of the loving, father tends to be more the disciplinarian, or teaching discipline to some extent. I think do both. But yeah, there's definitely a lean experience. That's definitely true.
Yeah, it tends towards that. I mean, like most things with sort of the ways male and female psychology, let's say, like most things, you got about 15% of men who are more like women than like men, and about 15% of men who are more like women than or more like men than like women. So but the vast majority in the middle, they tend to fall into these patterns, and that's why father involvement is like such a big deal. And it's also why I think that we're seeing this pathologized form of empathy that's been forming in kids these days, right? Where the empathetic thing to do at Evergreen State College is,
white people don't go to class. Yeah,
is to run around campus with baseball bats, beating anybody that you suspect of being a white supremacist, right? That's the empathy.
The Antifa sense of empathy. And actually, I think this is why is both so popular and so important. Jordan Peterson movement, where people's lives are like being changed because they're actually giving themselves boundaries, as you said before. Boundaries, I think the lack of boundaries eventually leads to a lack of gratitude.
Oh yeah, no, and that is another thing that Jordan Peterson talks about all the time, and that I talk about. Like, holy fuck, when I look, and I'm an atheist, right? And I think that in order to have gratitude or a sense of wonder, right, about existence, right, I don't need to believe in a higher power or a creator of everything in order to do that. I just have to go back and say, okay, like my furthest ancestor back was like a cyanobacterium in the primordial ooze somewhere in what is now Australia, okay, that reached out a pseudopod and picked that other cyanobacterium as opposed to that one. And if he had picked differently, I would not exist. Right? Or if my parents had had sex in a different position that night, I would not exist. Somebody might, right? But it wouldn't be me, right? So once you actually look at the scope of, the coincidences and the happenstances and everything that had to happen exactly as it did in order to create me, right? In order to create you, that, like, I don't think, I think there's plenty enough to wonder, to be wondrous of, in that, and just trying to encompass that in your mind and say, like,
there's so much complexity in the universe to be astonished by and to appreciate. Now, I am religious. I am deeply religious. So I think Jordan Peterson and I, the four of us, should just get in a fist fight one day. This is right.
See who wins.
Just
Who else is in that fist fight? Because it sort of cut out for a second.
Jordan Peterson, the God people, even though Jordan Peterson's kind of like an atheist God person, and Sargon and you.
Okay.
You mean Karen?
You're an atheist. Yeah. We'll just get in the ring.
Okay.
There's a God.
Is this like one of those challenges that they used to do before a battle, where it's like, judgment of God will decide?
Right. Yes. That's kind of where I'm going with that. Yeah.
Or like what the Vikings used to do, right? Okay, we'll see who's telling the truth. Fight to the death, and
trial by combat. Trial by combat,
because God determines. God will make sure whoever was telling the truth survives.
I don't know why that system died out. It's such a good system.
Oh God. Yeah. Well, this is going to be an interesting conference. I'll give you
Right.
that. So,
Round 1, Chicago.
there you go. We're gonna have many. We should, Allison. Maybe you should bring some of those like sticks with the foam on them that therapists have families beat each other with.
I'll bring
In
some
order to-
pool noodles.
There you go. Pool noodles.
Well,
Pool
just-
noodles.
that'll be the fight. I love it.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can
yeah.
wave pool noodles at each other. I actually asked Dankula and Sargon if they would reenact the Battle of Stirling Castle using foam block. So I'm sure I can add some pool noodles to that as well.
All right. Well,
My family's from Sterling.
Maybe you should take part.
I will. Yeah, I would. Love it.
but whose side are you gonna be on? Sargon's or
Well, with the side.
Dankula's?
Yeah, that's the real
The
question.
Scottish or the English side, essentially. You must choose
My
one.
family was Scottish. We have no English really.
Okay, well, I guess you're on the Scottish side.
Yeah. Well, Dankula's. He's got all that like.
Dankula's Scottish. That's right. Yeah.
He's got all that jewelry on his face. So
He's Scottish or he's just
he's-
Northern English?
I think he's Scottish. He lives in Scotland. But we can get him to like with the facial piercings and the blue paint. I think he'll be quite fearsome.
Yeah, I
Wow.
think so.
See if he can paint himself in some woad, huh?
Yeah.
That could be fun. Yeah, go to battle naked. That'll be one for the press, certainly.
Was that really a thing historically?
I think so. Yeah.
Yes, it was an
Yeah, with the
intimidation
kilts.
factor.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a beautiful sight, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like
1,000 naked blue painted men.
it's literally the epitome of stand up straight with your shoulders back.
Oh, for real? Oh my
Yeah.
god, we
Anti
are
berserker
out.
smurfs.
Because the reason Jordan Peterson says that posture exudes confidence is because you're exposing your most vulnerable parts. Well, if you're not wearing any pants, then you're going one better than that.
Yeah,
For
but they
real.
still lost to
No.
the Romans.
All right. But the Romans were different.
Scots didn't, but the Scots didn't because they
Yeah,
had
I
a
guess they didn't.
wall up to keep them out because they were so freaking crazy.
Yeah, that's true. So
But
I
I
guess the
think that-
lesson from this is if you paint yourself blue and get your junk out and, run
And
at the
attack
Romans,
naked, you're gonna win.
you're gonna
I
win.
think that is the reason for manspreading. I think the reason for manspreading, this is why I used to do it when I was in high school, is you sit with your legs spread open, kind of vulnerability. Like I'm so tough, junk exposed. And
Well,
I'm good with it because I know I'm such a badass that you will not attack me because I will destroy you.
it is a posture that actually projects confidence. It
Exactly
very
right.
much is, right?
And that is why I think that's the core reason.
Well, I think, for sitting like that in a normal chair, for sure, sitting like that on public transit, there's so many anatomical reasons why it would be difficult for a man to not have his legs apart, particularly
That's
while sitting sideways on, sideways to the direction of travel. So
I
if
do
you're
think
sitting
it's
in
a
one of those
compound issue for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're sitting in, like, you're talking center of gravity, you're talking, broadness of shoulder, narrowness of hips, all of that stuff. I have a narrow pelvis, and I have long legs, and you're talking seat height as well, right? And so seats are on the bus are shorter than are comfortable for me, and so my knees are always up. And whenever I'm seated with my knees above my hips, I spread my knees. That's just how I do it.
Comfort factor as well, for sure.
Yeah, so it's like there's and then on the bus, even sitting like that, I have a hard time actually not tipping over when the bus starts and stops, without holding on to a bar. So what are you
Video
playing
we're
here?
reacting to? I want to see this.
Oh, is this a man spreading video?
Oh,
I
you
wanna
guys
see
didn't.
this.
Okay, here I'll show you. It's you guys are talking about manspreading, and Lee Jeans put out a new ad.
Oh, God.
I won't
may
play
have
any of
to
the
do a
sound.
video on this specifically. This is amazing. I didn't
Yeah,
know about
yeah.
this.
I'll just play this one real quick. It's very short.
Okay.
I was just gonna put it up while you guys were talking, but basically, girl gets on the train. she's going to read her book. This total stranger woman is just happy to see her and disgusted that there's even a man there. This guy man spreads something that never happens. And then she, oh, this is so bad. So,
oh my God.
Men don't do that.
no.
Men don't wait till a woman sits next to them and then they spread their legs wide open.
Can I explain this? You realize that this is a bunch of women whose virtue is their vulnerability. That's how they get men to do stuff for them. So this is essentially just getting men to do stuff for you because you're vulnerable or you affect a weakness or an inability or being a damsel. So they're just playing up this idea that women are horrible victims of men manspreading, and then they get people to do stuff for them because of it. It's just the same
I
as
kind of feel
batting your
like
eyelashes.
more
feel like-
of the attacker, though. It's like
Sorry?
the victim at first, but then
they're
she goes
using
on the
this to
sort of the
attack.
front.
They're using this to justify the attack as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if
Really
that,
right. It's
if
a
it was,
justification for the attack.
if the situation was even remotely realistic, he would have just kept his legs normal because somebody was sitting next to him. He
Well, did
wouldn't
you
have
guys
been
see
like,
that video about that girl who
"Now's-"
had all that crap on the seat next to her and she just would not move anything for anyone?
Oh, I'm sure there are plenty of videos of stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, no, that's what woman spreading is.
She was particularly. She was just being the female version of man spreading is just having 16 bags across all the seats.
Oh yeah.
You know.
But it's like you look at how people behave and how feminists look at people's behavior, and it seems like for anything that men do for any reason at all, it might be the most innocuous reasons, like my balls are sweaty today, right? And because it's hot out, and so I don't want to actually do an impression of the dude from the killer from Silence of the Lambs, right? I don't want to tuck all my entire package, down against my anus. So that they have to read some kind of malicious or salacious intent into it, right?
Or motivation.
Yeah. So it's just like they impute motivations on men, and 90% of the time, they're not valid, and that's because
I talk about this so
100% of
much
the
on my
time
show.
it's ill intent that they're imputing, right? It's malicious.
This is one of my primary issues this is like my whole show basically revolves around this idea. Let's actually explore true intentions and true motivations. Like, what is their motivation and what do they intend with this, whatever they're doing? And I the reality is you don't always know. You don't always know what somebody. So exploring that is important. Oftentimes, this is how the left attacks. They take they say your motivation or your intention doesn't matter. Your action matters.
And by action, they mean its effect on them.
How do I feel about what you're doing? Irrelevant
Exactly.
what your motivation.
And it isn't even relevant what your action is. It's how it makes them feel.
Yeah.
If you say that you prefer white kittens and I feel like that was racially insensitive, you have to apologize to me.
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
you
No.
talking about?
Yeah. Well, but the thing too, right, is that when it comes to their own thing, right, or their own pet projects, I guess, right? So, objectification, right? So you are not allowed to examine the intentions, conscious or subconscious,
right,
of a woman who, say, goes out into the world wearing an abbreviated latex dress and stripper heels, right? She's dressing that way because she wants to, not because she wants attention from men, right? And you saw this in the Gillette ad, right? Like a woman who, who walking down the street, she's wearing short shorts, a midriff bearing tank top, right? Walking down the street, and she's surrounded by people in long sleeves, long pants, some of them wearing jackets, right? And she's not dressed for the weather, right? And we're supposed to assume that her intentions in wearing that have nothing to do with getting attention from men. And if a man wants to give her some attention, you need to stop him, right? And say, no, that's not okay.
About that, the guy didn't even like. I mean, I say in my comedy video of that, I say that he's catcalling her. Oh, look at the black guy just stopped the white guy from catcalling. That's so realistic. That was my joke, right? But he wasn't even catcalling her. He was literally walking up to her.
Yeah. He was gonna go say hi and maybe ask for her number or whatever.
Like, the man of her dreams.
Oh yeah, no, like a woman
stopped him from like giving her the life she wanted.
Like, oh yeah, but like look at it this way, right? I would never leave the house dressed like that, hoping to be hit on by a fucking male.
I know, he was a good-looking guy too.
I mean, like,
thought listening to this. Do you guys want to hear it?
What?
I'd like to hear my thought. I think that this battlefield may be fought over with men, but I think the ultimate battle is actually between women who want to get things done with their physical beauty and women who want to get things done with their vulnerability.
You are so spot on.
You know, so you have the women who are like, no, a man doing this because a woman is beautiful, is objectifying her. We need to focus on the vulnerability. But ironically, in both cases, a beautiful woman and a woman who's capable of affecting this kind of vulnerability, they are both like statistical outliers. Like I know personally, I am about as able to be a supermodel as I am to be a woman who can affect the rarefied forms of vulnerability that you see with like the top feminists. You know, like just I mean, they can just walk out of their house and immediately identify a dozen things that they're a victim of. Just in their backyard, they just walk out and it's a peaceful backyard. Maybe it has a nice lake, but they can identify.
Mosquitoes bite women more than men. Sexism.
Yeah, whatever. But that is a statistical outlier ability, just like being a beautiful woman. And you have these two camps of women fighting over which one shall reign supreme.
You're so right. You are so right. And the whole idea that men are the enemy in this whole battle, very tactic. It's really a battle of women.
Battlefield.
There you
go.
Men
are actually just the battlefield.
We're sort of an innocent bystander that's getting
sucked in.
Collateral damage.
No. You're not an innocent bystander. You're the sword and the shield.
Because really,
they weaponize men against each other in this.
Yeah, and then ultimately it's a fight between two groups of women. But here's what I would want to say to a woman who spent like years dieting into like the perfect size 2 figure, and spends years doing calf raises and Pilates and core exercises, and spends half an hour each morning getting her face on and finding just the perfect outfit to accentuate her ass. Do you really want to go out and have no man ever say a single word or breathe? I mean, because now with feminism, the bar for being attractive in public for a woman is set so high, you might as well be one of the 6 supermodels in the world to even get to it. Because a man, he's going to be, the cost benefit analysis has gotten so high that you better be a supermodel or you're not going to get any attention, because it's not worth it.
You're so right. I mean, that's what my girlfriend is. That's how I found her.
Oh yeah, no,
she's Victoria's Secret fashion show and grabbed her.
She's freaking hot, man.
No,
you grabbed her? Did you grab her by that? Never mind.
I didn't really grab her. I actually gave her my coat because it was really cold out. I gave her my coat. Yeah, that. But I think the real thing that got her, there was a couple things that I said. And this other guy were talking, and the guy was like a little bit better looking, taller than me, but at least I had more charisma, right? But then he said a joke. Talking for a while, and he said a joke, and his joke was funny. Laughed. Me and Valeria both laughed. I was like, "Oh crap! Now he's funny too. This is bullshit." So I grabbed Valeria, and at this point we weren't dating or anything. I just met her, and I pulled her against me, and I go, "Back off! She's mine." Right? And we all laughed, And then apparently she told me later that she was thinking, because neither of us really knew how the other one felt really at that moment. So, but later on she was like, when you said that, in my head, I thought, yours, yes, I like this idea. Like that got her. Like
Oh,
her
that's
against
beautiful.
me.
Yeah, it's
But I
sweet.
mean, like, how many feminists would be like, "How dare you grab her and pull her against you?"
That was
Yeah,
sexual
exactly.
assault there,
Well,
Mr.
assault
Reagan.
is what it was. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. No, but
Oh
I
my
make the
God.
same argument that you were making about about it being a women against women. I make this argument about abortion a lot.
Yeah.
Women, there's this weird idea that men want to control women's bodies. That's what they always say, right? Men
Oh
want
my
to control
God.
women's bodies.
So stupid.
Arguments I have against this: one, all the most fierce pro-lifers, women.
Yeah.
Men really
All
don't have
the big activists. Yeah.
passion about it are men that genuinely want to help preserve the life of unborn children, right? And like if they really did just want to control the bodies of women, benefit left is
Well,
this? What is the benefit of a man controlling a woman he doesn't know, controlling the body of a woman he doesn't know? Why do we care about making legislation a woman that we have nothing to do with? It's women
well,
to have babies because we want to control them. But I don't understand the logic. It doesn't even make sense.
no, it doesn't make sense. And when you think about it, like as a motivation, it doesn't make any sense. I think that there are a lot of men out there who feel the same way about, and as I've given birth 3 times, I had a miscarriage scare when I was pregnant with my first, and I, phoned my sister in the middle of the night, and because she was a doctor, she was living halfway across the country, and I phoned her in the middle of the night, like sobbing, right, going, I don't know what this, I might be losing the
Of course.
baby, can you tell me
Of
what
course.
to do, right? And so when you look at it like that, and then you've held a newborn in your arms, you were pregnant with them, felt them kicking, all of those things, and then you think to yourself, it's not as easy as just saying it's a cluster of cells, or it's my body, my choice, or anything like that. And it's also not as easy, I think, for a lot of the women who are pro-life to even discount the psychological effects on the mother of making a decision like that, because
Absolutely.
usually these decisions happen in a context of a perceived necessity, not
No, I'm
in.
super sympathetic to women who
Yeah.
feel like they need to have an abortion.
Yeah, and so you're looking at it like, these women feel like they don't have any other options. It's not necessarily that they're cavalier about having the procedure done, or about what they're going to do. And so because of
That's true.
that,
Lena Dunham.
yeah. Oh, she only wishes she had an
She
abortion.
was exactly right. Yeah.
But when you look at the psychological fallout from making a decision like that, and then, okay, what's the psychological fallout going to be if 2 years later, when it's more convenient for you, you decide you want to get pregnant, and you do, and then you have the baby, and you're like, okay, and I flushed one of these
Right.
2 years ago. Like, how could I have done that, right?
I was
So I
quite
think,
young when I was a teenager. I saw it was like a news story, and they were interviewing some woman in Ireland who had gone to London to have the procedure done, because in Ireland for a long time it was illegal. Like, yeah, it pretty much just traumatized me for the rest of my life. Like, I will forever regret that decision, and I'm never really going to be able to forgive myself and all this. And I was watching that, and I just thought, oh my God,
yeah.
like, how do we
So
not hear about this kind of thing?
yeah, and so I mean, like, it's I don't necessarily disagree with the fact that abortion at the early stages is legal, right? Not a criminal act. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I just wish that we could drop this sort of super cavalier attitude about it, right? That these, like, I think it was Matt Christensen said, I used to be pro-choice, right? But it's pro-choicers or pro-abortionists who have convinced me to reevaluate my position, right? And it's not necessarily people who are arguing that, you know, uh, safe and accessible, safe and rare,
Right.
right? It's the people
is a legitimate argument to be made by the pro-choice people. There are legitimate arguments to be made, but they never make them.
No, and then but he said essentially what put him on was, or what made him reevaluate his position was the pro-abortion lobby that are like,
Right.
shout your abortion, be proud of your abortion. I
Yeah,
had an
that's,
abortion. If you need an abortion, get one.
Okay, Karen,
Remember that
I'm gonna
chick
have
on
to
that show?
interject here. I'm gonna have to interject here.
Okay.
Because I do have to get going. I have.
Oh,
I
our
have to, yeah.
we
We're
should
at 2
probably
o'clock,
go to
2 p.m.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you don't have to go, Karen.
Yeah, no,
You don't
I
have a meeting
actually
till
probably
3.
have
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
thought,
but
oh,
We're having too much fun, you guys.
oh my God.
it's not
I
the
actually-
cavalier attitude. It's the pride. It's the idea
Yeah.
that you're sticking it to the man. But I want to get in a shill before I go, and I do have to go right now. So
Okay.
if you guys want to see Chris, or should I say Mr. Reagan? Mr. Reagan at the International Conference on Men's Issues now with bonus Badger content, please go to www.icmi.info. We have ticket options. We got the schedule. We got all the other speakers, including Sargon and Dankula. And I'm working on Karen to do at least a small speech.
Come on, Karen.
And yeah, come on, Karen.
Never.
Yeah,
You're
never,
too awesome.
never.
People love you, Karen.
or at least throw some foam blocks. But anyway,
Okay.
so yeah, go to icmi.info, find out more information on all of that. If you want to help us out with some remote options, remote ticket options includes archives of the live streams, live stream access while the event is going on, so you can ask questions and stuff. Go to www.feedthebadger.com and you know, I don't want to say help us out, but you know, get an option, because there's some really great options for remote tickets if you can't attend.
Help yourself out.
Yeah, help yourself out. And it's basically a sales goal drive. I'm trying to get it up to 30,000, and we're at 27,000 and some change. So let's do it. Let's do it, people. Anyway, I'm gonna see myself out, and thank you for entertaining my thoughts.
It was lovely meeting you. You're a very impressive person.
Oh, thank you.
Aw, that's so
Yeah,
sweet of you to
that's
say.
very sweet.
Well, I live in LA. It's not difficult.
Oh,
Well, I was going to say that Karen is brilliant because she can understand me, and most people. And it's not that I'm saying that I'm particularly smart. It's just that I'm particularly have difficulty actually explaining what I'm thinking.
You're esoteric.
Yeah, Karen seems to get it, and then she says, "This is how you explain it," and then people will understand. So,
Yeah, that's like the job of YouTubers, really. It's just to make esoteric language accessible to the masses.
Yeah,
There
that's
you go.
there you go. All
So,
right, well, thank you
okay.
again. Talk to you guys later.
All right. See you later, Allison. And yes, we should. I don't know if you want to read the super chats. We do actually have a meeting coming up around the hour, and I do have some things that I have to do before that. So
if you want to read a couple of the super chats, you can go ahead.
I could do that. I'm sitting here with no purpose. So before I do, I just want to say, in case, I just want to say, in case you guys did not know, Rutger Hauer passed today, 75 years old.
Oh
no!
Yeah.
Oh my God, he is literally my writing partner's favorite actor of all time.
I knew something was wrong because I felt that there was just less testosterone in the atmosphere. He's gone.
There was a great disturbance in the forest, for sure.
Damn you, God! Why didn't you take Madonna?
Exactly.
So yeah.
Oh, that is tragic. Actually, I don't really even care usually when a celebrity dies, but this one I actually.
Yeah, I'm the same. I usually don't care.
He will not disappear like tears in rain.
That is correct.
He won't. He won't. He will be remembered forever.
There you go.
Yeah. So press F to pay respects to Rutger Hauer. Okay, so Albert Nada gives us $5, and he says this is going all the way back when we started. So Canadian, $5 Canadian. He says, what I'm afraid of is that you're only 5'2" and 120 pounds. I don't know who that's directed at. So
what did they say?
What I'm afraid of is that you're only 5'2" and 120 pounds.
I don't
understand that.
I don't think Mr. Reagan is only 5'2" and 120 pounds.
Had made the reference that some women said, I'm only 5'2" and 120 pounds. What is he afraid of? I should have said 90 pounds. But 5'2" and 120 pounds means they're a little bit more hefty than they possibly should be.
Yeah.
What they were getting at.
Either that or they have good bone density.
Yeah,
I'm always about 20 pounds heavier than I look, believe it or not. Always have been. And it's just because I have good bone density. So
I've been until recently. Now I may look 20 pounds heavier than I should be, though. All right.
Okay, so and then we get another super chat from I don't even know if iVab2 for $10 and doesn't write anything. So thank you, iVab2, for that. Troy Davidson gives us $2 and says Uwu Allison. Miles Kinslow gives us $5 and says, hey guys, I never hear the media question the Democrats in connection to Farrakhan. Anti-Semitism on the left is not taken seriously. Well, of course not. They avoid it. It's a oh man, you know the thing
it's
about
weird, isn't it?
It's not that weird because I think that what's happened is the whole discussion around race, and gender and ethnicity. The left controls the language on that, and they have been for a long, long time. And I think that this is the reason why a lot of this stuff that comes out of people that are that you would think are on the left, it slips by, and it's a very involved. It's complicated, but I have a lot of thoughts on that. But maybe you and I can do a show and we'll talk about it on the other channel.
The thing I think is weird is that the left. There's so many Jews on the left.
Oh yeah, that's a thing that Jews on the right have actually said. Well, why are there all these Jews on the left? I don't know. That's
Prager has a real problem with this. Prager's always like, "What is wrong with you people?" And I'm the same. I'm like, guys, but a lot of Jews don't care about Israel in America. Have you noticed that?
Oh yeah, no. There was this one Israeli Jewish woman who wrote a paper. She wanted to find out how many Palestinian women had been raped by the Israeli Defense Force over the last 10 years, and she couldn't find a single one. So she wrote her paper, and her thesis was that the reason why no Palestinian women had been raped by Israeli soldiers is because Israeli Jews consider Palestinians subhuman.
I knew. As soon as you started the sentence, I knew that what a
Yeah. So I think that there's maybe some self-hate going on there. I don't know.
Yeah. Never mind the fact that it's possible they'd like actually respect.
Yeah. Or be like very, very well trained and given strict orders and obey those orders. Yeah.
At least. Yeah. There could be a million explanations for it, but she goes to the literally, and that's one thing that I hear a lot. There are a million interpretations of, especially Trump. They do this with Trump so much.
Oh, yeah.
There are like 10, 15, 20, 1,000 interpretations of what he said. And they immediately go, well, he is a neo-Nazi psychopathic murderer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. No, it's like
the
least charitable interpretation of anything. That's just the way. And I understand that. I feel for Donald Trump because he's getting the same crap that I've been getting since I started doing this. Right, from feminists, right, is that they take the least fucking charitable interpretation of what you said, and they say, so that's what you're saying, and then you clarify and say, no, actually, here, let me fill in the gaps that, you're reading between the lines, let me fill in those for you, right? And they're like, I don't believe you, right? You're just saying that because I called you on your disgusting misogyny, right? And it's like, so there's no winning with these people.
No, because their interpretation, it's what I said, motivation and intention don't matter. It's how they feel.
Well, it's what they feel your motivation and interpretation and intention is,
decide,
right?
They decide, yeah.
Yeah.
You don't even know what your motivation and intention is because you cannot access your subtle racism or your subtle sexism.
Yeah, no, and you can look up some of their theories, right? You got standpoint theory, and part of that is called something called problematization. And so standpoint theory places the determiner of intent is the person who receives the message, right? They get to determine the intent.
You guys are, because you can take these little theories I have and you go, that actually was thought of by somebody else and has a name for it.
Yeah, and then they have this problematization thing where they ask, you can problematize a statement by saying, Who is the person saying it? Why are they saying it here and now? Who will the statement harm? Who will the statement help? Right? And if you sufficiently answer those questions, you can essentially say, well, because this guy is white, and because he's saying it out of his white, because of his white supremacy or his white supremacist attitudes, and because it will hurt black people, and because it will privilege or help white people and white supremacists, I can just completely disregard everything he said as being problematic.
Academic, like absurdist academic approach to reality.
Oh, it's ad hominem. It's the ad hominem fallacy
Nonsense.
written. It's the ad hominem fallacy written right into their theories as not a fallacy, but a valid tool of analysis.
People don't respect, the scholarship anymore.
Oh, it's just like
or
ridiculous.
University, and it's so sad because these are such important part of society, and it's just like it's been made a mockery of by these like crazies. At least we still have physics.
There you go. For how long?
More or less.
I hear gravity is fat phobic. It applies different weights to people.
Did you just come up with that?
Body shape. Yeah, I did. So
I'm stealing that.
It actually applies different values of weight of mass onto people of different, and
Wait,
marginalizes. What? Yeah, well, gravity.
So bigoted. That is so bigoted.
I know.
Can't even think about that right now.
They're
can't even
literally
either.
being held down by gravity. Literally
That's
being
right.
kept down.
We are literally being Brian. That was genius. That was a nice cap to that. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Okay, so back on the super chats. Zeranx gives us $5 and says, well, that would suggest the least desirable women were women who couldn't conceive of an idea of how to make herself useful, at least to herself. No? And then another $5 and says, weren't feminists primarily married women who had things done for them to the point that they had very little to nothing to do? What do you mean? So the early suffragettes, the proto-feminists?
Some maybe. I don't know. You would know better than I know.
I think
I do think
they were mostly middle class white women of comfortable comfortable lifestyles, and they had nothing to do.
Yeah, well, I think also too it was they were looking at the men around them and saying, why can't I be a barrister like my father, as opposed to why can't I be a coal miner like my husband, right?
There is a phenomenon of women who prefer to be the dominant one in relationships, and I think that tends to create, almost a toxic environment for men. Some men, maybe they like it. I don't know. In my experience, the men who involve themselves with women who are highly, highly dominant, it's kind of a sad thing to see. They sort of lose all confidence, and it's very weird.
They become an indoor cat.
Okay.
Yeah, they become an indoor cat. And actually what happens a lot with these dominant women is that they say that that's what they want. Then they start a relationship or even get married. Their husband essentially becomes the passive one, and then the woman gets bored. And
mad at him.
And then she gets angry with him, she gets bored with him, and she divorces him. You can look at this is often. I couldn't give you like specific statistics. However,
abusive. They're really abusive. These women.
Yes. Well, this is a tale as old as Chaucer. This is the wife of Bath, right?
Oh, you are so right. Oh, you are. I love Chaucer, by the way. That is such a beautiful reference. I'm sorry.
Yeah, she finally stumbled across a man who would stand up to her, and then she's like, and yeah, we were happy together after that.
Yeah,
no, and exactly. Actually, I have met women I have dated women like this who I didn't recognize as super dominant until I talked to other people.
Yeah,
dominant guy, and the woman is like, typically just controls in society and everything, and you basically, to some extent, they love it.
Oh yeah, no,
they transform. And I had no idea the woman was like that until after other people were like, wow, she's very different now.
Well, you want to hear a secret, Mr. Reagan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so my guy, he was a little was a little prolific before I met him. When I met him, he
Heard that word. I like it.
he was simultaneously dating and having sex with 2 different women.
Wow.
Right. One of them was like a nursing student who modeled on the side, and the other one was a professional submissive in a bondage dungeon and a burlesque performer. Okay, so yeah,
So you named
and
this
then I
man.
met him, and so he was with, and when I met him, we were like, yeah, this is just going to be a casual, no strings attached thing. So it was like he had 3 on the go. He was spinning 3 plates.
Wow.
But and in the year prior,
Exhausting, by the way. That is
in
exhausting. I can tell you from experience, it's not actually that fun.
yeah, no, and in the year prior, he'd just like gone on this incredible womanizing thing where he just ignored school and just went out and partied and got laid by multiple tons of different women, right? He settled down with me. Whatever. But he said to me that it was the hippie, hipster, feminist chicks that would always tell him, well, you know what? I got like some intimate problems where, I just can't get turned. Do you have any lube? I just can't. I have trouble getting turned on. Right. And he would just look at them and he would say, you're safe with me, right? And they'd be like, yeah. And then he'd just say, I'm just going to do what I want to do. You can say no at any time, but unless you say no, I'm just going to do whatever the fuck I want to do. Right. And then all of a sudden they'd be like, oh, it's never been like that before. Can we do that again? Right. Like, I was so wet. Right. And it's like, I'm like, yeah, that's how women work. Right. They don't want your hair is like a flowing river. Or any of that, or may I touch your breast, or anything like that. They just want to be.
Want women to be more like that, but they're really not.
Yeah, they want to be. Most women want, and including a lot of feminists, want to be pinned down, rode hard, and put away wet. That's what they want.
You stated it so beautifully, like poetry.
There you go. And so it's essentially like, you got these feminists saying, oh, you got to ask permission at every escalation of a sexual encounter. And it's like, my guy is like, yeah, women don't like that. Here's what they like. So.
I don't like to talk about like intimates, like physical stuff usually, but it is astonishing to me how many women I've met. Oh God, I don't even want to talk about this, but that are just like, whoa, I didn't even know.
You didn't even, sorry, you cut out there? I didn't even know what?
Tell me, like, I didn't even know that, physical stuff. Like, up until this point, they've just been sort of doing it as a favor.
Oh,
and
yeah.
They're just like, wow, this is actually fantastic. This is actually a good thing, a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, how have you gone for 10 years without ever meeting a guy who was like, it's like somehow in our culture today, men have become so pussified that women can't even enjoy themselves in any capacity whatsoever for like a decade. It's unbelievable to me.
Well, men are terrified to do something like smack her bottom or pull her hair or anything like that, or sort of hold her down, roll her. They're terrified.
To some extent, be. And like choking was a thing I thought was weird, before I
tried it.
But I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that women want to feel the strength of the man. They want to feel some kind of physical strength, control, like that they are small and delicate in the arms of this man, but they're still obviously
safe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that I think that's where that comes from. I mean, I think that's one theory. I think there's probably several different things, but different women have different kinds of things, and most of it does kind of boil down to feeling like you are. It's a very strange thing if you contrast that with what we're trying to do in society.
Yeah.
It's weird because it's such a base fundamental
it's a very basic thing, and you can do a analysis of romance novels, and that'll tell you
Okay.
exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
quickest, the fastest selling book, and romance novels are a genre that not only are written almost entirely by women, with women as the target audience, but they are the largest genre of fiction, outselling all other forms of fiction combined. So everything else
Wow.
combined is outsold by romance. Women just they just gobble this shit up, right?
Yeah, I remember when I was
And
in elementary school and somebody had found it. I don't know where they got it, but they were reading lines from it, and all of us were just scandalized.
oh yeah, because it's like,
Eight-year-old boys like, what?
what?
Like,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
pornography, essentially.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, and a lot of it is, and my grandmother, she would sit down for 20 minutes every afternoon, right? And she would read a few pages of a romance novel. And we had all of these used books from her, and she'd always write a little note in the inside cover, right? And sometimes she'd write like a weak cup of tea, right? Or, V good, right? V good. And and I went and I read a bunch of these, and I sort of did a little analysis of my own, in terms of the ratings my grandmother gave these books, right?
Uh, You're rating the
And
ratings.
yeah, and I was like, so like the more dominant the male and the kinkier the sex, the better the rating
Better her rating.
from
Wow.
my grandmother, from my grandmother, who was like this. She couldn't even stand, like, we weren't allowed to say shut up to
Right.
my sisters and I in her presence. She could, if anybody swore in her presence, she was like
Yeah.
on top of them, right? But she
Think of
loved
our,
dirty
our
books.
of our good Christian ancestors
Yeah.
as an all sexual, but
Yeah.
we are here. We do exist.
Yeah. So
And
I'm like, I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, okay, so then it's just like, when I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at, 50 Shades of Grey being the fastest selling book in the entire genre, that is the biggest selling genre of fiction, right? And what that represents, and how that contrasts with what feminists say we need, they say we need to be having sex with each other. And I'm just like, that's a recipe for no more children ever, unless they were conceived in a test tube.
maybe men like boys at 15 to 18 need to start reading romance novels to understand how they're supposed to be.
I think that would actually be a really good idea. I never actually thought of that, but I think that you might be onto
The
something
idea,
there.
but it may be necessary in our society today. Really.
Counteract all those feminist assemblies and seminars that they're subjected to, and the feminist sex education stuff that they're being forced to do in
Al-
In
middle
my
also,
school.
mind is a reduction of the power of sexuality.
Yeah.
Time
yeah.
I hear one of these feminists talk about sex, it's like, sex is not a bad word. We should talk about this all the time. And I'm like, no, we shouldn't talk about it all the time because it's special and good, elevated
Yeah.
as a magnificent thing. And they're like, no, it's just like eating lunch. Like eating lunch.
Maybe for you.
No,
Hey,
because I
I'll give
think
you.
they had traumatic
I'll.
experiences in their youth
I'll.
and they want to reduce the power of it so that they don't feel so affected.
Well, any of them interested, I'll give them my boyfriend's number, and they can give him a call.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but okay, go on, Brian.
I got a couple more left to go. So,
Okay.
Starvat, that's the name, gave us 1,000 rubles, which is
Nice.
basically it's like 16 bucks.
That's Vidanya.
And says, just thanks for everything. Well, thank you, Starvat. And then lastly, Albert Nada gives us $5 Canadian and says, sexual assault. How about the North Country set, X2, X-Men United, and Wonder Grotto scene from Wonder Woman? Hello, Me Too, where are you now? He's basically talking about instances of men being sexually harassed or
assaulted,
or even assaulted on movie sets. But I mean, you know how it goes. Like we don't see men as vulnerable in those ways, so that's not going to happen. Hashtag Me Too movement. The only men that it actually included were men who were
assaulted by other men.
Assaulted by other men, exactly, and also politically towing the party line on whatever the narrative was. This is why when Terry Crews was celebrated, part of it was because he's a minority man. The other part of it is that he was assaulted by a man, and then but the most important part was that he used that to basically talk about toxic masculinity as a concept, which got him on Trevor Noah, and it got him on all these platforms. Because if you're just a man who's been victimized and just wants to like see justice, you're not going to get a platform. You actually have look at
you gotta relate it to the grander narrative.
Yes, you got to relate it to a grander narrative. It has to have a goal outside of that. Look at is it Corey Haim? Corey Feldman. Corey Feldman has been trying to talk about pedophilia in Hollywood for decades. No one wants to hear him because he's not doing it the right way, it seems.
Yeah. And then he gets told by Barbara Walters, "You're destroying an entire industry." What? An industry of like freaking the sex trafficking of child actors? What?
Yeah.
There's a lot of talented people out there who are not allowed in the doors of Hollywood.
Oh,
there
yeah,
you go.
sure.
We have resources. You don't need to keep the pedophiles in.
Yeah, no, it's like what's frustrating to me about that is, he was accused of lying because he said, yeah, no, I told this to police back in like freaking 1993 or something like that. And they're like, you're lying. And then 10, 15 years later, the police, actually, we found the interrogation tape. They were interrogating him about Michael Jackson. And because he had spent a lot of time at Neverland. And he said Michael Jackson was probably the only man who hadn't assaulted him, who hadn't molested him. So
yeah, that was his experience.
Yeah, and so you're essentially, oh my God, stop phoning me.
I have a normal phone. What is wrong with you?
Yeah, I have a landline. It's because because reasons. Sure. But anyways, that the last of the super chats because I actually do have to go.
Yes, that is the last of the super chats. That's it. So I'm glad this went long because I've never actually had a conversation with Mr. Reagan really before. Yeah.
So I'm glad that we had some time to like really chat about some stuff. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you. You're going to present and maybe be on a panel or two or something like that.
That's right. Yeah. And honestly, one of my favorite interviews ever. Just like,
well,
everything.
I just like to do. I wouldn't even call it an interview. It's just like chatting about whatever comes up. I like the conversation to sort of form organically. So, but yeah, it's been good talking to you, and I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person. And your unbelievably hot girlfriend.
She'll be there. She'll be
who,
there.
if I wasn't so old, I might even hit on, but I promise I won't because I'm old and I don't want to be creepy.
Go for it. So. I'll enjoy the awkwardness. I'll enjoy watching the awkwardness.
All right. But anyway, and I thank you, Brian, for hosting or for doing all of the back end stuff on this.
Sure.
I said back end. And
it's what I do.
It's what you
Brian,
do.
You're awesome. It's great meeting you, man.
It's good meeting you too, man. I'd like to have you on Honey Badger Radio sometime. Maybe you and I can talk. So.
Absolutely, yeah.
Without all these women folk around, just light up some cigars.
Them interrupting. Yeah.
Consider doing a show that was just men smoking pipes. Just talking because that doesn't exist.
No, I've always wanted to do that too. I've actually talked about it. I can't. Obviously, I host HBR, which is mostly a women thing. But I was like, it'd be great to have a
come to LA.
Yeah, a trophy room. Or like if you have like a library, a study, and then there's just a fireplace
bookshelves
and books. That's right. And comfy chairs and cigars and pipes. Yeah.
I love that so much. Like nothing sexual, just men.
Just men talking about man shit.
And shit. I love that.
Like call the show man shit. No, call it man talk.
Man stuff, whatever. Yeah. Man stuff sounds gross. Yeah, no, that's not right. that gets a little sticky.
A little sticky. Oh my goodness. And on that note, I think we're gonna have to say goodbye. Thanks to everybody who tuned in. Thank you for everybody who sent in a super chat. I appreciate it. well, I guess I'm going to sign off now, and I will see whoever I have the pleasure and the opportunity to see when I'm in Chicago, 16th, 17th, and 18th. Go to icmi.info, get your tickets, and or contribute in some other way through some other ticket or sales option available. So, all right, I'll talk to you all later. Bye bye.